Hello YouTube, LD50 here, back with another video, and we're just going to revisit our melee Amara updated for level 72. Talk about any changes that we might have made, and discuss the gear that you'll need for this build. So, the biggest difference that I've changed up from last time is we are now no longer playing URAD. In the most recent update from Gearbox that made the cartel event and other events permanent, they adjusted some of the anointments, and one of the anointments to get quite a severe adjustment was the URAD, or well under 50% health deal 150% radiation damage. That has now been reduced to 100%. Now, whilst that does apply to everything, grenade damage, action skill damage, etc., it's too much of a trade-off to lose health gate for that amount of damage. So we have changed back to a build where we're going to have full health, and we're going to get our damage a slightly different way. Now, the thing with this build is very much a kill skill dependent build. And the reason that I say that is we are relying on this skill, body and mind here, to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. Certainly in most situations. Now, that's a kill skill. And obviously you need to have an enemy you can kill to be able to get that kill skill. It does last quite a long time. I think it must last roughly 10 seconds, which is plenty of time to kill another enemy once you've killed the first one. But where you will struggle is where there are no ads. So, for instance, Grave Ward. You may find that you need to wait for him to phase through to produce some ads for you to kill. Then you can get your kill skill up, and then it's pretty straightforward to kill him. Some bosses are easy to do using the Stinger and Unleash the Dragon. The Ruiner is a good example of that. That will also work with other bosses, but that one doesn't work with Grave Ward, so that is the exception to the rule there. He doesn't take a dot. We are going to be generally using a Phaserker com, but we will use a Muse com for our bossing scenarios, and particularly if we're going to be using the Stinger and Unleash the Dragon trick. So we'll get straight into have a quick look at the gear, and then we'll have a look at the skills. So this time we have changed onto an action skill end. Weapon damage is increased by 100% for a short time. We're going to be using ties that bind for our action skill for most scenarios. You might want to change to phase cast to use the Stinger and Unleash the Dragon, but for most of our damage we're going to be most of our combat we're going to be using the skill ties that bind, and we'll use stillness of mind, but we'll talk about that as we go down the skills. First of all, we'll have a look at the gear. So action skill end, weapon damage. I prefer weapon damage to melee damage because I think melee damage is just an additive. It's a straight 100% added on, whereas this I think goes into the weapon, goes into the damage formula, and gets more things acted upon it. So you get, I think you get a bit more out of action skill end weapon damage than you do action skill end melee damage. Psycho Stabber, we obviously had a big nerf to the 300 over 90. Now it's 150 over 90, but that's still decent. That's giving you 1.5 times on top of the extra melee damage that the Psycho Stabber does. That's for applying the dot from Unleash the Dragon, and the Guardian Angel is for either for when you want to throw grenades from a distance, or if you have applied a dot using the Unleash the Dragon artifact and you want to get some distance between you and the enemy to increase that dot damage. And then finally, I use a URAD face puncher. Now, you might say, LD, I thought you said you weren't doing URAD. Well, yes, this one here is for Fight for Your Life. Obviously, in Fight for Your Life, you are under 50% health, and so you will automatically have this 100% bonus radiation damage, which might be enough to get you out of Fight for Your Life. Now, we're going to be using a Frozen Heart for most applications. The reason we do that is we want to freeze enemies because of some of the skills that we're going to be using, which we'll talk about when we look at the skill tree. And the Frozen Heart is the most effective, in my opinion, most effective shield for freezing enemies. You can use the Frozen Snowshoe if you like to slide. I'm not a big slider, so I like the Frozen Heart. We're going to be using the Fish Slap. This is a Cryo Fish Slap, and this one has both action skill and bonus radiation damage. We have that in a variety of flavours, including the on grenade throw as well, but I quite like the bonus radiation damage. It's a multiplicative damage increase, or any ASE elemental damages. And then we're going to be using, for most situations, an Icebreaker Victory Rush. We were using an Icebreaker Deathless before, but we're not going to be using that because we're not going to be running a Deathless build. And they have recently just fixed Victory Rush, so Victory Rush now works properly. Obviously, Icebreaker is multiplicative damage, 50% against frozen enemies. We're going to be freezing enemies with our Frozen Heart here, and I'm using a Phase Zerker, and that is because we want the action skill cooldown and the gun damage. Other shields that you may want to consider: the Revolter. The Revolter is a good shield to use against Wotan. It gives you a straight up 200% shock damage bonus, and obviously Wotan is resistant to cryo, so in that instance you don't want to be using the Frozen Heart, and you do not want to be using the Icebreaker. In that instance, you could use a radiation stone or some type of stone static charge. I would recommend corrosive stone static charge for Wotan. That's a good choice. This one has cryo damage on it. It's not perfectly rolled, but the corrosive stone and the static charge will provide enough damage to kill Wotan. As you can see in the intro, we managed to kill Wotan, and that was on true takedown. And then talking about the class mod, obviously we're going to use Phase Zerker mostly, but we will use a Muse for bossing. This Muse was dropped before they fixed the ability for it to come with 3 in Illuminated Fist. So you won't ever see a legitimate one of these at 72. I'm going to carry on using my level 65 one because it does have the 3 points in Illuminated Fist. This one dropped before Gearbox fixed that particular exploit. If you find a 72 Muse now, it will only have a maximum of 1 point in Illuminated Fist, but it is still a very good comm. You could also try using a breaker comm, or if you wanted to use a spiritual driver comm, you could use that with an elemental projector of some sort. So for instance, an elemental projector Victory Rush would work very well with the driver comm, particularly as it gives you this extra movement speed. And then obviously we will be using the Unleash the Dragon artifact here to apply a guaranteed dot to enemies using the Stinger shield, and you holding the Psycho Stabber. As you can see in the intro, we did that with the Ruiner, and for that we would change over to a Stinger shield of some sort. I've got them in a few flavors here. I think I used a fire one in that instance. So that's the type of gear that you're going to want to make this build work. It's not completely unfussy to play. You do have to monitor your action skill, because we're not going to be going all the way to the bottom of the blue tree, so we are relying on getting our action skill back as quickly as we can using other means, which we'll discuss in a moment. Right, the skill trees. We'll talk about the purple tree first. So we are going deep into the purple tree. We want to get all the way down to Clear the Mind. Clear the Mind is a great skill. It is a kill skill, and what it'll do is it'll mean that you won't get any elemental penalty on your damage. So say for instance you had a fire weapon and you were trying to get through an armor bar on an enemy, you wouldn't get the fire on armor penalty. The other kill skill that we talked about is Body and Mind. This is the one that really gives you all the damage for this build, and it's very deep in the purple tree. You've got to come all the way at the bottom here, so as you're down here you might as well go all the way and get Clear the Mind. So from the top, Heavy Rain. Splash damage that will be to, say for instance you're using the static charge, that will apply to that and to dots, and your action skill damage through Ties That Bind, I believe, gets splash damage bonuses. No Mistakes in Nature, extra melee damage if you inflict a status effect, and we are going to be, you know, putting dots on things. Now here we go, Unweave the Rainbow. This is a great skill. This works brilliantly with the Frozen Heart, because the Frozen Heart will guarantee to freeze enemies, and we'll be dealing both melee damage and splash damage to frozen enemies, so we'll get a lot out of Unweave the Rainbow. And also Go with the Flow. Whenever Amara freezes an enemy, she gains increased movement speed and weapon damage. So there you go, 21% extra gun damage and some movement speed, which is always useful, every time we freeze enemies with the Frozen Heart. So these two skills here work very well with the Frozen Heart. Currently, Combo Breaker, I believe, is not working correctly, so we're not taking that anymore. Joyful Freedom, this is great. This is extra melee damage after we activate Ties That Bind, or if you're using phase cast for bossing, this is also applied afterwards. Body and Mind, as we've talked about, so it looks like small damage, 5347 damage, which you think, oh, that's not very much, but actually this gets mayhem scaling. And importantly, this skill procs for every pellet on the face puncher. So with a ×7 face puncher, this pellet will proc 7 times, and with a 4×14 it will proc 14 times. That can be useful for getting out of Fight for Your Life, because it's a kill skill that remains active in Fight for Your Life. So unlike Zane, who loses all his kill skills as soon as he goes into Fight for Your Life, Amara does not. So if you have Body and Mind active and you shoot an enemy in Fight for Your Life using this ×14 face puncher, then you will get 14 instances of Body and Mind. They will get you URAD bonus radiation. So that's how that skill works. Obviously, if you're in Fight for Your Life and you don't have an enemy to kill, or you haven't still got this active because the timer has run out on it, you may struggle a little bit to get up, which is why I say this build takes a little bit of skill to use, to be aware of your surroundings and enemies on the battlefield. Going down the green tree, we've got 5 out of 5 into Clarity, because we're now wanting some extra health regen, and we've got 5 out of 5 into Arms Deal for extra splash damage and some splash damage reduction that will help us stay alive, and a single point into Find Your Center for the extra melee damage. On the blue tree, we have 5 out of 5 into Do Harm, because this is going to give us rush stacks. Rush stacks is going to increase the damage from our ties that bind, our action skill, and we'll get up to 45% damage with maximum rush stacks. 3 out of 3 into fast hands, because that will give us extra reload speed and weapon swap speed. Weapon swap speed is important if you are going to do the stinger trick, where you might want to swap away to the Guardian Angel. And the reload is nice as well. And then 3 out of 5 into Restless, to increase our cooldown, and a single point into Ascendant, because that will increase all the effectiveness of any augment that we use. And this allows us to get ties, Stillness of Mind. Ties that bind and Stillness of Mind work very well together. And also, when you freeze these enemies, excuse me, when you freeze these enemies, they stay in place. So everything stays in place, locked in place. You can hit one enemy and they all go boom. And then finally we're going to have a look at the red tree. So we're going to take 5 out of 5 into infusion. It has been suggested to me that you only need a single point in infusion, but I have tested this build and I found actually it's worth putting all 5 points in, because you are going to get your elemental resistance bypassed by using this skill down here. And because you don't then get any penalty for having the wrong element against a particular enemy's weakness, so fire on armor or something like that. What that means is that this converted damage 40% stays at 40%, but it's pure elemental damage, and then it becomes multiplicative. It doesn't get any it doesn't get a reduction in efficiency, because you're having elemental bonus penalties for mismatched elements. So that's why I use 5 out of 5 there now. I put 2 out of 5 into Anima, because I like a little bit of extra duration, but I found that 5 out of 5 was a little bit too much. 3 out of 3 into Steady Hands, that gives us a great accuracy, which means with the Face Puncher we can aim down sights and get more of the shots on target. Single point into Illuminated Fist, depending on which con we use. This can be boosted with the Muse, otherwise it's a single point. 5 out of 5 into Tempest to increase our elemental damage. Single point into Dread, because that gives us extra gun damage and reloads our weapon if we kill enemies whilst they're grasped. 3 out of 3 into Indiscriminate for the Ricochet. That's a great skill there. And a single point into Sustainment, which is where we're going to get all of our life steal and health back from. So that is our skill tree there. Now, an important thing to talk about with this build is this is an end game build. This is for when you've got your Guardian rank up, you've got all your good stuff. You need certain skills within this Guardian perks table here to make this build work better for you. The most noticeable one that you need is Groundbreaker. Melee attacks or slam will trigger an aftershock, dealing 10% of all non-melee damage you have dealt over the last 5 seconds. So the damage that you deal with Ties That Bind is action skill damage, so that's non-melee. And then if you melee something using the Face Puncher, or you were to slam straight afterwards, you can trigger Groundbreaker. Shield Reboot, Emergency Response, these here work very well to get your shield back, and when you have your shield back you have Topped Off. Topped Off is, I believe, around about 200% action skill cooldown. So Topped Off is an important perk to have, so you need to have come at least this far, and you need to at least have got to Shield Reboot and Emergency Response, and obviously down to Groundbreaker. Dead Man's Hand, that's a great perk to have, because that allows you to be accurate with your shots in fight for your life. And Resilient, recovering from fight for your life with full shelf and shields really helps as well. So yeah, you need to have spent some a good amount of points into the Guardian rank to make this build work effectively. We've been playing on Mayhem 11. I don't like to mess around with the modifiers too much. I just find it a little bit tedious. I like the game as it is. So there we go. That is the updated level 72 melee Amara build. I do hope that you give it a go. It's a good fun build to play. It's a little bit... you've got to be a little bit careful with how you play it. You've got to be aware of where the enemies are, and also making sure that you're able to keep your kill skills up. So being aware of which are the weaker enemies and which are the stronger enemies. Obviously with the victory rush you want to be concentrating on then killing badasses, because that will proc the victory rush and give you a lot of damage boost. I think that's pretty much it really. I think we've revisited Melee Amara now. I'm hoping that Gearbox do not go ahead and increase the level cap again. I think there's sufficient points there for them to keep it as it is. So that is really where we're going to wrap it up for today. So if you have enjoyed this content, please consider subscribing to the channel and leave me a like down there. That will give me some motivation to make more videos. But I've been LD50 and you've been lovely, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye for now.